welcome to episode 1 of NaPoWriMo 2023. I can't believe it's April already, and here I am, Bex Sherwood, your host in all things NaPoWriMo. For those uninitiated joining us for the first time, or if you're coming back, welcome back. NaPoWriMo, also known as National Poetry Writing Month, covers the month of April, where folks are challenged to write more poetry. The traditional challenge of NaPoWriMo, which is 20 years old this year, crazy, is to write a poem every day for the month of April. We decided we can't do that. So we have set ourselves a different challenge, and we are doing 5 poems over 5 weeks with different themes. We're going to have different prompts for you, and we're going to share our writing journey with you through our wonderful YouTube. You can also join us with our writing club over on our Discord, but more on that later. To kick us off, as I mentioned, I am Bex. I will be your host through all things NaPoWriMo, but it's not just me blathering on about poetry for an hour. No, I'm joined by 3 others who will also be blathering on about poetry for an hour. So please join me in welcoming Katie Ailes, Mark Gallie, and Kevin Mclean.
Yeah.
Hello.
Poems. What's going on? It's that time again.
How is it April?
How has that happened?
That one time of the year where we write poems.
100%.
The only
Yes.
time of year.
We're all very excited to get some more poems to go into our set because we need a forced deadline to write. And if you are like us, then why not join us and end up with 5 new poems after April is done? So we've done NaPoWriMo before. We have previous examples, which you can click in the little dot or in the description down below to see our previous seasons of NaPoWriMo. In some of them, the first year, we did attempt to do it every single day. We swiftly moved on from that. And for our second and third years, we used our workshops and our prompts from our Return to Form series to instruct. But this year we don't have forms. We're going to do something a bit different. Before we get into what's going on this year, we're going to look back at the past and share some of the poems that we produced in previous years of NaPoWriMo. So does anyone want to start, or should I kick us off?
I mean, my preference is that people do go backwards chronologically through our NaPoWriMo series because I get thinner that way.
Our
you
hair
see more
changes
of my face.
dramatically.
Yeah.
It's the best way to view our content is in reverse chronological order.
Yeah, that I would recommend as well.
The poetry gets worse, but the people get better. So.
Yeah.
We look happier as we go back, you know, like
I don't know.
Taller, like
that first year in 2020, we just don't talk about that. Just don't talk about that.
Is
But
true.
yeah.
That was a lot of poems.
The poem that I am sharing, or I was planning to share, is from our 2021 NaPoWriMo series. Is anyone planning to share anything from 2020, or is that the earliest one that we're looking at?
2020 was when we did every day, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, they're
Every
all
day, and
useless.
it
No one's
was-
sharing anything from there.
And it was lockdown had just started, and we
Mhm.
were like, oh, this will be fun. Like, we'll be locked down for a month, so we'll do NaPoWriMo. And that was
didn't
not
know.
the case. But you can go back and listen to and watch those. It's an
Absolutely.
interesting time capsule.
Did
It
we
is
ever
a
get
weird
proof that
reflection.
Gallie completed his poems?
Yeah.
I read it to you, like,
Okay.
like on like the next episode.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, let's not fight. Okay, I'm going to read a poem. The
We would
poem is
love to
kind
hear
of
your
about
poem.
fighting,
Yeah.
actually, now I think about it. So maybe it was a good segue. As part of our 2021 series, we used a lot of forms, and our 2022 series, we used form to instruct what we were writing. So I imagine most of the poems that people are sharing shortly will be in form. My poem that I'm going to share is my univocal in E. I don't know whether is that how it's called? Is it a univocal in E, like it's a major key or a minor key? Okay,
I think
great.
so.
Every
I
day's
could be wrong, but
day.
that makes the most sense.
I mean,
So-
if you're, no one's going to correct you, Katie. So if you tell me it's right, then I believe it's right. You can read this and more of our poems and our brand new anthology, Love Poets Volume 1. Woo! Okay. Moving on to the actual poems now, away from the unplanned, poorly executed plugs. So this is Fever. Nerves steeled, gentle breezes, she freezes. Expert. She reflects, tested, never bested, yet she needs strength. She's hell-bent, her senses extended, detects flesh. Stench fresh, 20 meters west, her feet creep. Step, step, step. Eek! He seeks, perplexed, yells between green trees, eyes meet. He greets her. She pretends. Shyness, mystery, cherry red cheeks, eyes weld. She embezzles, help. He melts, kneels, gentle tenderness. He feels blessed, serene, seen, clement speech, synergy, glee. He rests, then she descends. Teeth meet neck, shreds flesh. Helpless, he trembles, wrestles, feebly defends, bleeds plenty. He sleeps. She feeds, prevents frenzy. Her energy swells, refreshed. She checks. He's met the end. Self-resentment, she regrets yet never repents. She flees. Thank you.
Ooh.
So
I'm
good.
like a
People call you
vampire
the cow
univocal.
poet.
I know. 100%. Hey, maybe this year there'll be more cows. Who knows? But
It's funny, like univocal is one of the ones that I think works best. Like, you know, it's interesting how you framed this in terms of NaPoWriMo as a device maybe to like get some new pieces in your repertoire and stuff. And that is not my experience of NaPoWriMo. I have one poem out of 3 years worth of NaPoWriMo that has like become a regular part of my set. But like if I was to put another one in, and I think it's just because of subject matter wise, it's a bit intense, so I tend not to rotate, it would be the univocal I did. Because I think there's something about the oral sound of a single vowel that makes it such a good piece for like performative poetry as opposed to page poetry.
I think we've all performed our univocals live. I know I have, although
I
mine's
have as
quite
well.
long, so I don't do it often. But yeah,
Well, yours isn't a univocal either.
I mean, mine's a duo vocal, which is
Yeah.
either cheating or leveling up, depending on how you look at it.
It can be both.
it can be
It can
both.
be both.
Why not?
But I remember as well when in the episode where you shared that initially, where we were all doing our univocals, because we both used cherry red,
Yeah.
like cheeks, I think it was,
Yeah.
which was
I think
was
yours,
great,
I think mine's cherry red. I think yours was berry red. Or
it might have
something.
been
It was,
berry
like really
red.
close,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah.
It's to see more of the univocals that everyone else did. We do have our univocal episode. Again, everything we talk about is linked. So just go and check the description or the eye or the wherever. I'm not sure. It'll be somewhere. If you just look, you'll find it.
I think it's really interesting as well how much of like the NaPoWriMo stuff, when you have to kind of like, you know, pull a poem out of your arse a bit more than you normally would, right? Of like, okay, I have to write a thing, not because I have some intrinsic desire to say something. How often we lean on like pop culture. And so like that poem, for those that don't know, Gallie, myself, and Bex are part of a Vampire the Masquerade game.
What up?
And nerds. And that poem is about one of the characters from the game. And so like it's very cool for me as the like person that runs that game to like get this kind of like cool, you know, pop culture kind of thing based off it. But I know a lot of stuff came up. Like I wrote in NaPoWriMo's previously a bunch of wrestling poems and a bunch of like superhero poems and stuff. Just because you're suddenly like, what shall I write about? Oh, the thing I'm watching. Good.
Yeah.
So
Something
just
about
tips,
the
you know, when
immediate-
we're looking at like going through NaPoWriMo, if you're stuck in your writing, maybe like look at like how you can pull influence from the things.
Follow the hyperfixation. Follow it to glory.
I want to see everyone's The Last of Us poem. Is what
I would be
I
actually
don't.
though.
I
That would be
don't.
kind of great.
I don't.
Well, does anyone else have anything vaguely supernatural, or should we just go?
I got something on a
Everyone
similar
stares at
tone.
Mark.
Oh, great.
I think I can match your tone.
I didn't mean to call you out so directly.
no.
I didn't want to just say, Mark, I'm sure yours is also some horrifying.
Got anything
horror
weird,
thing.
Mark?
To be fair, if it would have been truly the more proper thing to do would have been to come in with one of like my nicest poems, because it would have freaked you guys out rather than actually being scary. But
very unsettling.
So yeah, mine is from last year. And so it's the Villanelle when we did them. And sort of across the board with Villanelle. Going back before we did this, I was like, Villanelles, these seem like a weird thing that you can get sort of strange with. So this was the one I wrote last year. And again, I get very annoyed at this poem because I wish I hadn't written that so that I could write it this year. Particularly. I was like, because this is one of the, for like my performance-y poems, this is where I think I've been clever in how I've written this. But this is also in the book, in the anthology. I never said we should kill him. How dare you? Quit joking, give me a break. That would be far too grim. I maybe daydream of him with paper-cut skin, a severed limb, acute aneurysm, no more than my flights of fancy, fabrications, fake. I never said we should kill him. I suppose I could have made his weaknesses less well known, though. He's a weak chin, the fact he can't swim, but to say a thing outside sleep, sober and awake, that would be far too grim. There's just so many mishaps to which one can fall victim, a road crossed wrong, misplaced medicine taken late. The embrace of the unholy snake, I never said we should kill him. I did author a novel of his every imperfection, written under a pseudonym, a deed needed done, but to put in personal stake, that would be far too grim. For him, I offer the opposite. Absence, a symphony with no rhythm, a prison with no escape, an endless loop of every mistake. I never said we should kill him. That would be far too grim.
Love that
Such
poem
Your
so
snow?
much.
Come at me.
Welcome to this Halloween NaPoWriMo special.
Yeah. Oh, we're starting off spooky. Stay with us. It will
Yeah.
uplift.
It will.
Maybe.
And then it'll come back. Well, yeah, no, and then it'll come back.
Oh,
Who knows?
it's so good. I remember hearing that the first time and loving what you did, because with villanelles, there's a sense of, okay, there's the repetition, but part of the challenge is how you vary the lines each time. And
Mhm.
like, do you change a word or is it just through intonation? And I love that every, I never said we should kill it. Every time is slightly different. And that to me is the epitome of what it means to use a form at its full potential, not just repetition because the form said so, but repetition with slight alterations is at the core function of that poetic form. So yeah, I love that poem. And the
It's-
pun on villanelle is like,
It's
Yeah.
all because I can't spell and assumed they were the same. I'm
but you're
eight
putting
poems.
that to use.
I'm 8-9 villanelles deep into the super villanelle because I've got a spelling impediment.
That's some crazy shit, Mark. That's
Like
really
3 of them
wild.
aren't gonna go in, and I already know that. Like they don't fit to what I'm doing. So tune in next year for when more villanelles will.
Hey, yeah, I mean that's what we said last year.
Maybe there'll be
so-
villanelles of this year.
Hey,
Who knows?
there could be villanelles this year. That is very true. I really love that villanelle. I love that piece in general, just because it's such a great piece, and it doesn't. The fact that it is a villanelle doesn't improve or diminish the quality of the piece in any way at all. But it's fucking great. Does that make sense
Yeah,
to say
no.
that? I
Thank
love
you.
that it is a villanelle, and that's very cool and super impressive. But also, such a great piece that even if it wasn't a villanelle, I would still be mega down and super impressed by it. It's like such a cool way to use a very rigid structure with a lot of stuff that's hard to tackle in a way that's very super performable, awesome, hilarious, terrifying, all of those things.
Thank you. Because was it last year I went mad, or was it the year before?
You've
I don't know
always
when you
been
wasn't
mad,
mad.
dear.
Well, I think I declared my madness on one of these NaPoWriMos of previous years.
I think it was last year, but I think really it should have been the year before.
Probably should have been. Thank you very much, guys. That's
It
good.
is with form. I always think it's best when it becomes invisible. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Where then you can read a piece and put it out there and people wouldn't be going, "Ooh, yes, villanelle, very clever." Like it's.
I kind of want someone just once in that.
That's
tone,
why you always
in
put
that,
it in
yeah.
your intro. You're always like, by the way, just so you all know, this is a golden shovel. You should all get quite excited about it, and like you explain the form to them before you do it, because otherwise people are just like poem. Especially when most of your stuff is then like free verse, right? Or like you're dealing with spoken word audiences. So often they don't necessarily know or particularly care about what a form is. Here's an interesting thing where I think like form is so specific to page poetry, whereas like you can put form into spoken word, but it just like it's not as relevant because then you can just read it without form. Like
depending on the form.
Because like, when it's on the page, you would call it, like, you look at it and you can see form easier. Whereas when you like listen to spoken word, I guess you would be like more inclined to recognize like the meter or the beat rather than like, oh, that's 4 or 5 lines, because you can't see the line lengths, but you would have those like, I suppose, beats, at least that.
Especially so often in like things like villanelle, where the like a lot of the fun of a villanelle is like the drop off lines and how you manipulate and force the line, right? Of like, okay, what's your repeat? What's your repeat? Can I like half that word and use part of it and then bring the part into the next bit, you know, like the way the enjambment works. And it becomes this like, you know, how to get more out of a single repeating word. And so like that is fun that really exists on the page. I don't think that is as present or as existing, because the way you read it is never like that. You never then imply the break in the line. You just like read it how you'd wanted to read it in the first place.
Yeah, with different forms in different ways. I think you're right. Yeah. But I'm so glad that I was just going to say, I'm so glad that we spent 2-3 years doing returned form and then all these NaPoWriMos, because I feel like all of us now know form inside and out. You, the audience, may be utterly sick of it, but it's I feel like it's been a really good education for us and so valuable, because I think a lot of us went into the project thinking, okay, is form relevant to spoken word? And at least speaking for myself, I came out going, oh hell yeah, which is really exciting. So
I think especially when you go, it's like a building block, right? If you're going to say you use free form, then what you mean is you use forms interchangeably and loosely, and you use aspects of form, you know, to bring together into one piece. So you do need to understand what that is beyond kind of like the core things of like, you know, rhyme and assonance or whatever. Like you need to get into okay, actual structure, like what is the difference between like you know, how repeating words are used in something like a villanelle as opposed to like in a free form capacity as like a refrain, right? Like in how that you can then get loose and use it as a refrain because you understand the practice of it in something like a villanelle. You know, it's good grounding.
I think some of the forms we have looked at are definitely more of that, oh great, spoken word tools, and some of them can be more or seem more relevant when it is written down, because they can be more of a like visual clue. I've had a contrapuntal can be more of a visual one. Just to segue into
who could have a wee contrapuntal?
Someone might have a contrapuntal to share with us. I don't know, maybe. Kev, is that you?
Yeah, and I think it's, again, just to follow what I was saying, because I often feel like I'm like it's because I'm a big spoken word advocate. I feel that sometimes it comes off as like I'm like sort of dismissive to form.
You hate page poetry. We understand this, Kevin. You do. Who doesn't?
But then you get into like people like Edward Morgan or whatever, right? Where they use like page poetry so interestingly, and like the shape of the poems and stuff that he works on is so integral to the piece. I think that's my thing. Is sometimes I look at like a certain form and kind of go, what does it do? How does it help? How does it lean in? And like, I know in previous years of this, I've been the very grumpy guy being like, didn't like that form, too restrictive. But one I really enjoyed last year was actually contrapuntal, because I think it is one that can lean into theme easier. There's like the way everyone used contrapuntal was really interesting, and like the different tacks it took, but it always felt like theme was very important to it, whether it was like two sides of a conversation or like the mirror thing Gallie did, or like, you know, the kind of stream of consciousness thing like I've done, where it kind of pieces different thoughts together, but the theme of the piece, because it's about sleep, my piece, it's about kind of having insomnia and things like that, and so that sort of disconnected piece of thought and how you attach it back together became a really important part of it. And I like form where it informs the theme, where it like the form is purposeful rather than just kind of, oh, I chose to do a sonnet because sonnet, like, you know, whatever. So yeah, this is my contrapuntal from last year. My 3 a.m. brain texts different. It whirls inside my skull, always reaching the same conclusion: you could change the world. But morning comes. Bloodshot eyes blink in the light, the will to change, fading with the night. I see further in the darkness. I hear clearer in the silence. There is clarity in my tiredness more than you even realize. A fog descends. Let the grind commence. A dream that ends. Was it all pretend? My 3 a.m. brain ticks different. I see further in the darkness. It whirls inside my skull. I hear clearer in the silence, always reaching the same conclusion. There is clarity in my tiredness. You could change the world more than you even realize. But morning comes. A fog descends. Bloodshot eyes blink in the light. Let the grind commence. The will to change, a dream that ends, fading with the night. Was it all pretend?
I love that poem so much. And I'd entirely forgotten about it. Have you ever shared that apart from NaPoWriMo?
No. No.
It's
It's
so
really great.
good.
A big problem for me, and what I'm gonna do this year, and I'm really gonna commit to it, is like I've spoken about it before. My old writing practice, I wrote in my head, and it came with like a lot of drawbacks in terms of like the ability to edit, to do more conceptual stuff, to do page poetry, for example, to use form in any significant way. And so I changed how I write, and I now write like a real person with like words on a page. But that has like fractured the way I would memorize, because memorizing was like inherent to my writing practice, whereas that's kind of not the case anymore. So I am going to actually go through a bunch of stuff and try, and because I don't like reading on stage, it's a personal thing. Some people do it very well. I feel it limits me. And so I'm going to try and memorize some of the pieces like that. Like when I was looking back through stuff, I was like, that poem's actually quite good. And I think it could be a performance piece. There are ways to do that. Because I think I could read it a third way as well, which I didn't do there just because I think it feels very still. But I think if I was doing it as a kind of 3-part, kind of 3-act structure to a performance piece, it would work quite well. So yeah, that's part of what I want to do this year, because I'm very excited to be back to not having the confines of form, but having the founding of form. And so I'm really keen to try and write some pieces that do go into sets. I was very, very pleased with Lasco from like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And like that is my go-to poem just now. Like I really enjoy that. And so I want to try and use April, the only time of the year I write, to actually get some new pieces to go into sets and stuff. So yeah.
That's a good and noble and super valid and very relatable aim for this year's NaPoWriMo. I feel that. I think that's a good one. Well, Katie, I'll let you share your poem, and then we'll see if anyone else has any hopes for this year's NaPoWriMo. Then we'll set our first challenge.
Yeah, I was trying to think of which one to do, and I was going back through last year's pieces and refound one that I don't think I've done on a stage. Maybe I've done like once, but I actually really, really like it as a poem. So it was kind of nice to actually go back through and find it again. And it's a terza rima, and basically what I did when I wrote it, so terza rima is sort of in Italian comes from 3 rhyme, and the idea is you have 2 rhymes going at once, and there's sets of 3, and essentially you're braiding rhymes through the poem. That's how I find it really helpful to think about it, and how I kind of taught it in my workshop. And so then last year when I was trying to write a poem in terza rima, I just kept thinking about braiding. So I was like, all right, I'm going to write this about braiding. Just go with the obvious flow. And so, yeah, so I want to share that poem. In a dream last night, I braided your hair. First, I chose the plastic comb, began at the ends, split and frizzy, gathered them with care, and slowly separated the fragile threads, the teeth bending slightly at the snags, the stubborn knots rough and clumped. As a child, I'd pretend the tangles were tiny snakes that clasped each other and got caught. Slowly, I teased them out, worked through each snarl like it was a nasty thought, as though this act could help to soothe, coax some easy neatness into you, bring peace beneath your frazzled scalp. Next, I drew a line across your crown, picked a piece running temple wide, divided it in 3. The simplest stitch. Cross right over left, release, select again, left over right, repeat. Weave in sections from the sides, catching each strand as you descend. A pattern worked into me over years, muscled into my hands, now worked into you. Finished, I tie it off with a blue bauble. In my dream you stand. Reach back to feel the ridges, kiss my cheek and breathe deep. Your mind, a lullaby. So yeah, that's that.
I can't believe you've never shared that. That's such a great piece. You must have just forgot it existed.
Yeah, it's funny because I have 2 Terzarima, because I have the one that I wrote as an example poem for the workshop, and you know, truth be told, most of those example poem workshop poems, they're not great. The standard Habby one,
bounty one,
the standard Habby is about how much I love bounty bars, and it's horrifically bad. but part of the point was being like, look, I am literally learning alongside you. I'm literally writing alongside you. So like, this is the first time I've tried this as well. We're figuring it out. But weirdly, the one that I wrote for the Terzarima workshop, I actually loved. And that's a piece about my nephew and his 4th birthday. So I tend to, if I'm going to do a Terzarima, I tend to do that one. But then it was nice to rediscover this one.
Because it's a really good example of kind of like reflecting back on what we've been talking about, is that thing like of the like inform and form informs it, like as well with all the layers and knots, and it works into it, and because they work so well together, you could not tell me that was a Terzarima, and even if I knew what a Terzarima was, I'd be like, that's lovely and it fits, but then to discover it works on multiple levels. It's just Thanks. So I get why you do the other one more, but maybe this one should come into the rotation every now and then.
Yeah,
it was nice to get the chance to share it on
weave
this.
it in.
Oh. All right, see you next week.
That's us done.
No, you can't leave yet. We've not set our challenge.
Bex, what are we doing this year? Please tell us.
Thank you all, first of all, for sharing your wonderful poems. I'm really glad you got an opportunity to reshare pieces you haven't done so much, and to reflect and to look back and go, my goodness, aren't we better at analysing each other's poetry now than we were 4 years ago?
That's good.
I like sound good. I don't feel, but now we can talk about assonance and all of those things. And if you'd like to join us in that conversation, then a great place to start is our Form Fundamentals workshops led by Dr. Katie Ailes. As mentioned before, it's all linked below. We have loads of free resources up on our YouTube channel to help you write in form and out of form, and just to kind of know a bit more about what this whole poetry thing is. But this year, we don't have a return to form series to shamelessly plug and steal from, so we had to come up with different challenges.
Oh no.
One of the things
what will we plug?
I know. Don't worry. There's plenty of plugs at the end. But one of the fun thing about poetry is getting to explore it in all of its different facets, whether that is a written poem or a spoken word performance piece, collaborations with musicians and other people, and all sorts of fun, different ways to best showcase what we're offering in this art form. And that's really what we're exploring this year. Is we're going to have a look at a few different challenges. We're going to set them, ask you to join us if you wish. You're obviously also welcome to go to the official NaPoWriMo / GloPoWriMo, Global Poetry Writing Month website. They will be posting prompts every day. I'm sure a bunch of other people will be posting prompts every day, but ours are more of a weekly challenge. And our first challenge that we're going to be tackling is page poetry. So Katie, while Kev gets over his immediate upset and annoyance,
I just said that I was happy to be.
And also the one poem that you say you've performed most was your concrete poem,
which is
fundamentally page or
Yeah,
base.
and that's me used that idea that I had, Gallie. So then I had nothing.
Yeah.
Well,
Katie.
we'll have a discussion. Let's fill everyone in. What, Katie, what the hell are we talking about with page poetry?
So this year, and I don't know, Bex, are we planning on sharing all of our prompts in this episode, or are we going week by
we'll go
week?
week by week.
We'll go,
Don't need to overload you.
Oh, I see. All right. So this won't be a spoiler per se, but I think one of, as Bex was saying, one of our big focuses is kind of looking at all the different ways that poetry can be presented, right? And all the sort of mediums through which we can compose poetry and access poetry. That's kind of one of the things that we're most interested in NaPoWriMo, but also just as a group. Obviously we do, you know, we're really known for spoken word, but we have a book and we do our YouTube channel. And so we're interested in poetry across media. And so for me, when I think about page poetry, and, you know, there is no one definition for page poetry, I would sit here all afternoon and rack my brains, and academics would still come and bonk me on the head with a wok. So the way that we're kind of defining it for this is the challenge is to write poetry where either the only fitting medium for it is the page, or it being on the page somehow enhances or increases the meaning or the kind of value of the poem in that way. So think of something that the negative example being, if it was performed aloud, it wouldn't work or it wouldn't make sense, right? You need to see the text written out, because the way in which it's written out, the format in which it's written out, something about that forms part of the poem's meaning. And going briefly back to the Return to Form series, there are some forms like concrete poetry. The whole idea of concrete poetry is that it is visual, that it relies in part on the format of the poem on the page or on the stone carving. You know, it can be three-dimensional as well. So concrete poem is a core example of what we would call, kind of, here we're calling page poetry, but yeah, something that relies on the printed text.
It's like more visual to
like
than the sound-based one, right? Because that's really the the trade-off, right? One is more visual, one is more auditory or audio.
Everyone get excited for Kev's acrostic.
Well, I mean,
which would be a good example.
It would be a good page poem. I will say though, Kev has a really fantastic, we mentioned it earlier, Lasco is a concrete poem, which is a predominantly visual form, and it's a great, I'll put it up on the thing, Katie, you don't need to find it.
I was just
pop it up for everyone to see
book that it's in.
Yes. But the poem itself, the content of the poem, even out with of it being in a concrete poem, is a great poem, hence why it's gone into the set and we all love it so much. It may be the new I Want, we haven't got quite that far yet. But there's time. It's a great piece, and I think it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't need it to be only seen for it to still stand as a great piece. So it's not a case that you have to just do a poem that only works on the page, but that is one way to look at this challenge. And that's going to be the interesting thing. And we all come back next week to see how we have interpreted that. I mean, I have done a piece before in Poetry for Cows, I will also put it here, which Katie hated editing, which is a homonym poem called Diary of a New School Year or something similar. And the thing itself reads as a normal letter, just a normal letter, you know, nothing weird, but the amount of spelling mistakes and homonyms and switched words and those kind of things that I've put in there are because it's in a page format. And that was very important to me when I was writing the pamphlet, to have some poems that made sense as to why it was going to be a written book. And that's really what we're looking to explore over this next week with whatever poetry we produce. Kev, you seem a bit upset that we're starting with page poetry.
No. I think there is often an idea that there is like a page stage debate, or like, you know, that it's a clash, right? They kind of butt heads, these two concepts. And I prefer to think of it as like a page stage spectrum, right? Like you have poems that lie at the very like page end, right? And so that might be because they are visual is like a concrete poem, for example. I referenced them earlier. A lot of Edwin Morgan's work and stuff is very, very much centered around how it is laid out, presented, seen. That could be because of the density of the language or the imagery. Because I mean, my definition a lot of the time for like page poetry is it's supposed to be poured over, kind of stripped apart. And you're supposed to go and glean extra information, look up that word you didn't know, find out about that person you didn't know who's referenced in it. And those pieces inform. The more you know about Seamus Heaney as a person, the more insight you have into his work. And it's very personal nature. And that is where you get this density of page poetry. And there's a benefit to having time to be able to sit with it independent from the creator, the writer, the person putting it out there. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have performance poetry, stage poetry, poetry that is supposed to be kind of ephemeral, like it is supposed to exist in a singular presentation. We just recently had Joelle Taylor up as part of our shows. Now, Joelle is an icon in the spoken word scene and also someone who's a very talented poet, writer. And so their book, Canto, and like the poem itself, Canto, that is like the sort of main piece of the book, is a wonderful piece written down and like can be performed live. But when they did it with us, they had Jack Hinks playing music with it, and it became this singular piece that will never be performed the same way ever again. Like it was an improvised musical poetry collaboration. And so that is like a good example, right? It is written in a book. There is a way Joelle normally performs it on a stage. And then at the extreme end, there is the kind of like improvised music with Jack Hinks. My personal preference leans on middle to stage. And that's kind of where I find myself. I think most poets, whether they are a page poet or a stage poet and how they see themselves, will mostly fall in that central spectrum. And that's why most of the poems you write as a stage poet, like there's not like, this couldn't possibly be put on a page. It's so unique and brilliant and has to be seen live. For myself, I have things like Insomnia, where I think that one does specifically exist as a live piece. But like most of them, they're a poem, they can be put on a page and do just fine. But like, leaning that way. I think with the page poetry thing, I think I find it harder to conceptualize something that is solely for the page, that is enhanced and at its best on the page, as opposed to live, because a lot of what I do is like rhythm and flow and like my presentation of it, intonation, things like that are the tools that I use. Especially when I started out writing, I wasn't a very good writer, but like I could make up for that with being very like verbose on stage and being very like bombastic in my performance style. And I still lean on a lot of those tools. And so, yeah, when I look at it and I go page poetry, I'm like, take away all the little tricks and stuff I have to rely kind of purely on the writing, which is just a challenge in itself. But I hope that helps if you're watching and thinking, how do you make that differentiation? I think that's kind of where I've got to like think of it more as a spectrum.
Yeah. And I think as well, Kev's going to be really disappointed. We're just going to do nothing but page poetry. This NaPoWriMo, just all page.
All page poetry.
So
All page
even
poetry.
even if this challenge seems a little away from what you normally do, as Kev said, it's not his real comfort zone to have stuff on the page. That is part of the beauty of NaPoWriMo, is getting to experiment. And if at the end you come out with a piece that you want to share, fantastic. And if you don't, then I hope you learn something, and that's the point.
Not me, though. I have to.
Yeah, Kev has to. But
we don't
yeah,
have a choice.
so we will be back here sharing our page poetry next Sunday. So you can find this all up on our YouTube channel. In the meantime, if you're like, I'm a bit stuck, where do I get started? Then come and join us over on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. All of details as below. We're on every social media channel at IAmLoud Pro. We will be sharing some great examples of cool page poems, some things that might be inspirational, some of Katie's workshops that might be useful, like her concrete workshop, and that will be up and over on our Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and any other place that you could want it. We also have a Discord for our Loud Poets Writing Club. By joining our Patreon, you qualify to join in our Discord. We have a great community of other writers and performers who, some of whom will be doing NaPoWriMo, whether it's every single day, whether it's following our challenges, but we invite you to come and share your work with us. If you need some advice, some help, some inspiration, someone to collaborate with, someone to drive you to do stuff, then why not come to our writing club and see if we can set you up with a good partner? Not like that. Well, maybe like that. Who knows?
Maybe.
Lots of poetry is
Matchmaking
very
happens.
like that.
You
If
two
you-
look like you might rhyme.
Yeah, that's gross.
no.
If you are watching this on Sunday, the 26th of March, the day it is released, why not join us at the Kilderkin tomorrow for our March open mic? We are going from April. We will now be going to twice a month with our open mics, and they will be going on even throughout outwith of April. So you can check that out up on our socials or on our website, IAmLoud.co, to find the latest of when our next open mic is, how you can get involved. We also are doing a huge slam series this year. Pew, 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 pew. It is the biggest thing ever, and I'm so excited to have it go as well as it has so far. Thank you everyone who's been to one of our showcases, signed up for our slam. Thank you to our winners and all our competitors and our judges. It's a huge year for spoken word in Scotland, and our slam series, we still have regional heats in Dundee, in Inverness, we have Aberdeen, and we have our Edinburgh. So if you are a poet and you are interested in coming along, winning 200 quid, qualifying for a grand final at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and potentially winning a £3,000, then why not have a look at sign up and join for our humongous slam series? It's going to be so cool. I'm so excited. If slam's not your thing, then you could just come along and watch one of the showcases, and you can also come to at the Scottish Storytelling Centre. We have shows at the Scottish Storytelling Centre every single month this year. There will always be something. We'd love to have you along, and we've been selling out, so you better get in quick if you want to come. Next show will be on April the 14th, and our next slam will be on April 15th in Dundee. As I said, you can find all the details everywhere. I'm constantly talking about it. Just come and find us. Come and look at our socials, and you'll see all of that available there or in the description below. But I think that's
Deep
the
breath.
end of our plugs. Did I forget anything?
That was
I think that was it.
impressive.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
That was very
Nailed
good.
it.
I've got shook the rust off now of getting ready for this NaPoWriMo experience.
The one thing,
over the
I
next
would
5
add
weeks.
is if you have missed the slam thing, if this is the first you're hearing about it and you're like, what the heck, a whole slam series? Well, lucky old you, we have filmed the whole thing, and the full slams are available on the YouTube. You can go and see the West Heat and the South Heat.
The South Heat will be out tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes, but go watch the West one first, and then South tomorrow, and then join in. So
Follow along.
go and check those out. They're all going to be free and available on YouTube. So
But yes,
Amazing.
so we look forward to seeing you next week. We'll be sharing our page poems. If you write a page poem or any other poem, we'd love to see it. Feel free to tag us. We're very interested into having as many people writing, including ourselves. The more poems you write, the more you will force us to write over the course of this month, which is really the whole reason we set up this podcast in the first place. It's just to force. I just wanted to write more, and I
Big
thought I would
internet accountability.
force my friends to do it alongside me. But to leave you off to ponder your page poetry, we have a great example of concrete poetry from our Return to Form series from George Bartlett McNeill and Stuart Kenny and their concrete poems, and we will leave you to enjoy that. Otherwise, we will see you next Sunday. Ching ching, pew 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 pew.
Return to Form is a project exploring different styles of poetry. We pair up two poets, challenging them to use the same form and the same inspirational material to show how totally different pieces can be created from the same starting point. Concrete poetry, visual poetry where the shape of the poem relates to its meaning.
There is resilience here. Concrete grit. Refusal to be worn down, though we'd be forgiven if cracks were to start showing. A city of sandstone, dulled through the years, a legacy of coal fires, hence the nickname Aldreekie. Fair Edinburgh, constant in your beauty, whether streets are loud or quiet, gracious even when few visitors stop to gasp in awe or slow their footsteps to cast their gaze as fishermen would hurl their nets to the sea. Your castle and your causeways steeped so richly in history. Your statues seem to dip their heads in acknowledgement, even as footsteps metronomic in the rhythm of rushing home fail to notice. The echoes of whispered secrets in dark vennels, confessions and stolen kisses under starlight or in doorways. Your charactered tenements, all so similar but slightly different. I remember my many ventures up echoey corridors and worn stairwells, all the escapades. The university parties where music blared until 1 a.m. or else the hushed whispers in darkened rooms, lust masquerading as professions of love. By definition, I am but a visitor myself. A bright-eyed yet regular pilgrim from the honest tune, wee Musselburgh. And I love where I live, really I do, but honest old Riki, you are my home too. Some of my best memories were made within the boundaries of your city limits, like the time I went skinny dipping at Portobello Beach, or taking in shows at the Fringe, or nights out with my close friends which were so good I can't really remember them. Sweet Edinburgh, you are where I found my voice, myself, made me. You isn't just where your house is, or even where your heart is. You made me realize that home is me.
Kirketin could cause an earthquake if she stood up. That old troll who lay down on her muddy sofa once so long ago and dozed off while the world grew up around her, attached itself to her shoulders, mud piling, drying, wetting, rising, solidifying in her creases, caking on her skin, bolting her body and crusting her chin. She's comfy enough there. Oh no, not stuck, just content, a little lazy, and considerate, aware that any movement would not only, after so many years, cause great muscle ache to herself, but would uproot 100 trees, unhome 1,000 birds, many more insects, and a handful of mammals, including a few of those humans who tickle her with their hiking boots and cause the twitches which shake up the landscape. Long have her lips been locked, eyes shut, ears and nostrils blocked by mud sprouting plant life and spreading around her body to form the ecosystem you see today. How much life she has given to the world, and how much she has sacrificed for all that which she has never had the chance to see. When the wind whistles, she still wobbles a little. Look on a rainy day when so few do, and the wet has washed away a layer or two of the muddy icing on the hillside, and you can just about trace the outlines on the hill that is home to a heart and a mind.